If you've been around motorcycles for any length of time, perhaps you've heard someone describe an accident by saying, "I had to lay it down," suggesting the rider intentionally crashed so as to avoid a worse outcome. I call bullshit, and in this episode of the Shop Manual, I'll explain why.
This episode of the Shop Manual is brought to you by Kershaw, my go-to unboxing knife and a tool I carry with me everywhere.
Get 25% off your next order at KershawKnives.com with the code KNIFE25. When someone says that they had to lay it down, it gives the illusion of control, of intention. It attempts to transform the rider's panicked overreaction, which is usually braking too much, locking a tire, and then sliding out, into an act of bravery. In reality, I had to lay it down is something people say when they've made a mistake and they're trying to save face. I get it. It makes the crash less of a blow to our egos. However, unless your motorcycle has suddenly become a genuine threat to you, say because it's engulfed in flames, or your brakes have failed completely, or an 18-wheeler has pulled out perpendicular to you and sliding under it is your only option for avoiding decapitation, then giving up and bailing out, i.e. crashing to avoid a worse crash, is ridiculous. Laying the bike down sounds gentle, even pleasant, like you're gonna read it a bedtime story and tuck it in. Except, in my experience, crashes aren't gentle. And the notion that intentionally putting yourself on the ground is a viable and perhaps even desirable option is based on some very questionable assumptions. The first idea is that by getting away from the motorcycle, you'll somehow have more control over how you slide into something. Except when the bike is upright, you have options. You can brake, steer, or even accelerate to avoid danger. Once you lay the bike down, your options have narrowed to almost nothing, and everything is being left to chance. Then there's the opinion that you will somehow slow down more quickly off the bike. Now, if a collision is unavoidable, then slowing down as much as humanly possible before impact is certainly a priority. However, the coefficient of friction of your riding gear on pavement is dramatically lower than that of rubber, even cold rubber on pavement. So a rider that separates from the bike is going to slide a lot farther than they would if the bike was upright, on its tires, with the brakes properly applied. But perhaps the most glaring issue with the "I had to lay it down" myth is that it suggests that your average rider has the reaction time and skill to crash on command in a controlled fashion. Now, that kind of seems like the type of maneuver that probably requires a little bit of planning and a lot of practice, which I certainly don't have any experience with. Thankfully, I know somebody that does. So, Tom, you are a professional Hollywood stuntman. You've been doing stunts and coordinating for 25 years. What does it actually take to lay a bike down?
So what you do is you determine where you want to start the crash at, and you hit your brake, lock the rear wheel up, you turn the handlebars. The way I just turned it would have put the left, my rear wheel out to the left, and it would put me on my right side. You lock the rear wheel up, and you keep locking it up until basically your foot peg collapses. At that point, you can no longer brake because your foot's no longer on the foot. The ground has pushed your foot off the foot peg.
How do you feel about the idea that people say I had to lay it down as a reason for crashing?
Well, then I'm just like, here comes the bullshit. I'm like, here we go. It's like, you don't want to crash until you're going to hit the immovable object. You always want to be in control as long as you can. Because as soon as I hit the ground, I have inertia with me and I'm sliding until I hit something or until the inertia stops. You can slow down a lot faster on a motorcycle than you can sliding on the ground.
As a professional stuntman, I'm curious to know what you think of an average rider being like, oh, I could crash a motorcycle. First time, never practiced it before, on instinct, just like lay a bike down successfully.
Yeah, I think the average rider would struggle with it. In my experience, what usually happens is they panic and they hit the rear brake because they're not really very good at the front brake. They hit the rear brake, they lock the rear wheel up, and when you lock the rear wheel up, it usually slides to one side or the other, and then next thing you know, you're on the ground.
So, unless you're getting paid big bucks to do it for the movies, Crashing should be avoided at all costs. And if you want to improve your ability to avoid crashing, get yourself some rider training. Or at the very least, go to a vacant parking lot and practice your emergency braking and your evasive maneuvers. Saying I had to lay it down is irresponsible, so please, let's not perpetuate it. In fact, I would suggest eliminating the phrase from the motorcycling lexicon and replacing it with something honest, like, I made a mistake. Try it with me, folks. I made a mistake. And remember that that's okay. Crashing sucks, but it does happen. So rather than burying the experience under some euphemism, why don't we study it and try and learn from it so that we can avoid a similar situation in the future?